Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on another exciting adventure into future possibilities. This is Mission Evolution, where we share innovative thoughts and information with today's leading experts, bringing evolutionary solution to today's unique challenges. You, my treasured audience, are a very important part of this discussion. Email info@missionevolution.org with any comments or questions. We'll address them on the very next show. So take notes, sit back, and enjoy. This hour will consider divinely thriving in the age of anxiety. Even before the pandemic and resulting trauma, it had become relatively clear that there's nothing like stress and anxiety to compromise the immune system. One thing our modern lifestyles have in abundance is stress and anxiety. As we look to moving forward and life hopefully returning to somewhat normal, what have we learned from where we've been to help us proceed in a more balanced way? What can we do to improve our personal health and well-being? Is there any guidance in the wisdom of the ancients to help us reset to a more wholesome way of life, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually? With us this hour to explore the treasures held by the ancients and their modern-day application is Ayurvedic Practitioner Jonathan Glass. Jonathan is the founder of JivAtma Energy Healing and the author of Total Life Cleanse. He's a Master Acupuncturist, energy healer, herbalist, and Natural Health Educator. He served on the faculty of the New England School of Acupuncture and the Dharma Institute of Yoga and Ayurveda. Jonathan has facilitated thousands through his transformational JivAtma Energy Healing Total Life Cleanse programs. He's been in private practice since 1987 when he co-founded the Healing Essence Center with his wife, Katherine, in Concord, Massachusetts. His website, healingessencecenter.com. Jonathan, thanks for joining us once again on Mission Evolution.
Thank you so much for having me, Gwilda. I really appreciate it. It's really great to be here.
Nice to have you. So would you tell us a little bit about the Ayurvedic practice, please?
Sure. So Ayurveda means knowledge of life. Veda means knowledge, and Veda means life. So it's an ancient system of medicine that is the sister of the yoga system that is aligned with the principles of yoga. And yoga very simply means link or union. So it's the process of unifying the body, the mind, the spirit, and then you could also say the spirit of the soul with the divine. So the system of medicine that is in harmony with that is called Ayurveda. It's a very sophisticated system. It covers a lot of bases. It actually included even things like surgery. It's very sophisticated in terms of herbology and physical practices, yoga practices, breathing practices, even gemology, mantra, the use of sound vibration for healing, astrology, palmistry. It includes all those things, and diet, nutrition, lifestyle. So it's quite vast, but once we identify our imbalances and the directions that we want to go, it's wonderful. It's just ripe with all kinds of wonderful possibilities and recommendations that are available.
How old is the practice?
Is Ayurveda? Well, it's known to be at least around 5,000 years, but in some of the more ancient Vedic scriptures, or the oldest Vedic scriptures, speak of times many thousand years prior to that Ayurveda was prominent. So it's understood that the first written documents were around 5,000 years ago, but it existed before that.
What language were they written in?
In Sanskrit.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Sanskrit's called Devanagari, and Devanagari means the language of the gods.
And so what nationality did it originate in?
It was in India. And it was, there's a place called Navadweep, which was one of the areas where it began in India.
When you listed all the things that are included, from gemology to herbology to and on and on and on and on, it sounds like a lot of the New Age practices have snatched a little piece of it and made a practice out of it. Is that
Sure.
accurate?
Yeah, in fact, you could even say that Chinese medicine emerged out of Ayurveda. Many argue that Ayurveda was really the first comprehensive and systematic health practice on the planet that was, well formulated and put together because of its vast nature. And there's even sort of an understanding, this gets a little bit more esoteric, was that there's life on other planets, and that a being named Dhanvantari, who is considered to be an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, came to the earth to bring this specific type of medicine to the planet, specifically so that people could, fulfill their their Dharma or their life purpose in this life in human form, and at the same time tread the path of self-realization or yoga simultaneously, where, like I said, it's very sophisticated and very effective. The modern medicine, and this is not to criticize everything about modern medicine by any means, however, it tends to be very linear and doesn't necessarily acknowledge the reality of consciousness and the soul, or the force, the life force in the body, where Ayurveda begins with that understanding. It fully accepts that, so that everything is around. Just like Hippocrates said, for doctors, they take an oath, do no harm. Ayurveda also considers that very deeply, but do no harm in such a way that it interferes with the spiritual development of the living entity.
So do no harm, but in addition, don't interfere with the spiritual development of the individual. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Wow, just amazing. So what drew you to be an Ayurvedic practitioner, Jonathan?
I think it was just one thing from another, really. I mean, I got into somehow or other massage therapy, interested in that quite early in life. I think mostly it first came about when I was at camp. One summer I injured myself and I went to the infirmary, and it was just sort of, this is in 1969, kind of crazy, but the nurse at the infirmary knew shiatsu, which is a type of Japanese acupressure. And it just kind of blew my mind, because I went in there with a lot of shoulder pain, and I walked out 100%. All my pain was gone. Granted, I was 9 years old, and body heals darn fast at 9 years old, but it still was almost a shocking experience. And that stoked my interest very, very early. And in high school, I started practicing meditation. And in some ways it was just to help me get through the social craziness, and also I found that my sports were better. I played soccer, I played hockey. I found I was much more centered when I meditated before the games. But in doing that, it began to open up my consciousness to other possibilities, and I realized that life wasn't just as it seemed, or that I was sort of being taught only by society, that there was a lot more to things. So I started reading books, and sort of it became my hobby in a way to read books about yoga and meditation. And I also had a lot of severe allergies as a kid. I was very sensitive to dairy, and I had horrendous allergies, and I discovered that changing my diet made a big difference. So one thing led to another, and then I got really seriously into meditation, and that sort of led me to the practice of Ayurveda.
So what kind of training is required? If it's so vast and expansive, it sounds like there must be quite a bit of training.
Well, there's a lot of potential training with Ayurveda, and there's different degrees. And in this country, it's becoming more and more solidified. What happened with me is I got really into Ayurveda, and I studied a lot of books, and I went to India, and I studied with a teacher there. But I didn't get many degrees that way. And when I came back, I just decided because Ayurveda you couldn't get a license in Ayurveda. So I ended up going to an acupuncture school called the Worsley Classical Institute for 5-Element Acupuncture, which had a lot of similarities in its philosophy to Ayurveda. So that really drew me. So I basically, in my mind, was practicing, in one sense, Ayurvedic acupuncture. And from there, I went on to study more with a number of different teachers, and I also studied with a person who was one of the first students of Basant Lad, who was one of the first teachers in America, who came to America from India, and he has a school in New Mexico. So that's where I really did the foundation of my studies, was with this person. And there's always more to learn. There's always more to learn. I'm not an expert in gemology or astrology, although I'm very familiar with it. But if I have a Vedic astrologer where he practices something he calls Asterian astrology, but it includes the aspect of Vedic astrology. And if I have questions or issues with a patient, I will often recommend my patients go see him, and they get a lot of insight, and then I get to hear their readings and learn from an astrological perspective. But it's very powerful. There's so much there. I mostly work with diet, nutrition, lifestyle, herbs, meditation, that type of thing, breathing practices. That's sort of my specialty.
So was originally, or if we know, did they, like you were just talking, break it down where people were kind of like specialists, which of course would break it apart? Did they do that in ancient times, or was a person expected to be a jack of all trades but maybe a master of none?
That's a good question. I know that there were definitely specialists in what's called Jyotish, which is the Jyoti means light. So it's basically a master of the stars, or one who knows the stars. So that's what astrology is. So no, there were people that specialized in different areas. But in other words, if you went to a Vedic and Ayurvedic clinic, you might have a main doctor that oversees your case, and he might do the assessment. He might assess your dosha, your body type, might assess your imbalances. He might make dietary recommendations and such, but then he might say, okay, now you're going to go for the next, month, every day you're going to get a massage from those 4 people over there. And then you're going to get your Jyotish reading from this person over here, and then you're going to get your palm reading and your Jyotish and your gemology. Oftentimes the Jyotish and the gemology goes together, and sometimes with specific mantras they may go together. And so that's kind of how it worked. There would be a main person who manages the situation and then will recommend to different specialists. So, he may not be an expert. He probably learned the appropriate massage therapy, but he may not be practicing it anymore. We may have other people that do that full time.
So it's not dissimilar from what we're doing today with our major care practitioner and then our
Right.
specialists.
Right.
That makes
And
sense,
I would say
given
that-
as vast as it is.
Yeah, it's similar in principle, although it's different practically because I've certainly seen a lot in my practice where there may be one doctor leading the show, but they're not necessarily in great communication with all the different other doctors.
Well,
There
we're going to have to
oftentimes
take
is a communication breakdown.
We're going to have to take a commercial break. Jonathan and I will return shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, coming to you on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and the X-Zone TV channel, www.xzonetvchannel.com. again, this is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. To our faithful and thoughtful audience, we really value your opinion and would love to hear from you. What do you think about counteracting the impact of the stressors of our times? Email me at info@missionevolution.org and give me your thoughts or questions so we can all share them on the next show. This in from a member of our audience regarding the episode entitled The Evolutionary Potential of the Human Brain. M.O. states, "This is an outstanding segment. Puts so much together. Driving to the bookstore now to get the new book." Thanks, M.O. Dr. Jill Taylor was an amazing woman with a powerful personal story and message about the hidden potential of the human brain. It was an honor to have her on the show. Curious, dear audience? Visit our archives at missionevolution.org, listen to the episode entitled The Evolutionary Potential of the Human Brain, and let us know what you think. With us this hour discussing the thriving during times of anxiety is Jonathan Glass. His website, healingessencecenter.com. Jonathan, what does Ayurvedic say about the root cause of illness?
Yeah, so there's two things that it says. There's the root, and then there's you could say that with a seed, and then there's the root. And the seed is a very interesting word. I'll say it, pragyaparad. And pragya means knowledge or experience, and aparad means to offend. So Ayurveda says that the cause of all disease or imbalance ultimately, is when we offend our own wisdom, knowledge, and experience. So what that means is that when we disconnect, and you could argue that's when we're not in a state of yoga, when the body, the mind, and the soul are disconnected in some way, that can cause pragyaparad, or either the unawareness of what is best for us, or the denial of what is best for us. So it's a complex thing. But one example could be it could even be an innocent thing where a parent may force a child to eat something or eat more than they may want to eat. It's very simple, but over time the child may lose touch with their sense of being satisfied from eating and bypass that, and theoretically could develop an eating disorder later in life because in their childhood they always had to eat too much, and they had to make a decision: either if I don't eat what my father is telling me to eat, then I'll be punished. Even though I get a stomachache, I'd rather get a stomachache than be punished. So anyway, so then we can develop these bad habits based on childhood experiences. And there's different versions of pragyaparad. I'm sure most people can relate to times when your intuition was saying, do this, do this, do this, or don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and you go opposite of that, and you get some kind of negative result. That's also pragyaparad. The
So it sounds
cause,
it sounds like what you're speaking about is turn from your natural balance point.
Yes, that's a nice way of putting it.
That's offense. Okay, so it sounds like also socialization is one big offense.
I'm sorry, what is?
Socialization, the way we grow up in the world, in the modern world.
Yes, absolutely. It certainly can be. Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were about to tell us the second part.
No. And then the other one is called ama, and ama means toxin. So toxin is also considered to be the cause of disease. So certainly we know about physical toxins, heavy metals, chemicals, substances in the air, GMO, herbicides, pesticides, so many toxins in the environment. Also, if the digestive system is not functioning optimally, then even if we're eating healthy food, if it's not broken down properly, some undigested protein fragments can get into the bloodstream and cause inflammation and cause problems. So it can be either literally toxins from the outside or toxins that the body releases internally due to poor assimilation and digestion. So that's ama. But ama can also be there on a mental level and an emotional level, because if mentally we don't digest something, or if we have frozen images of how things should be, then we're not going to perceive and digest life around us very well. Ayurveda it's all about digestion. So then also emotionally, if we don't digest an experience. So when we take in food, we're meant to take it in, utilize the nutrients so that it nourishes us, and pass on the rest, eliminate the rest. And the same way, experiences are meant to be that way. We take in, we have the experience, we learn something from it, we may experience some pleasure, just like in eating, and then release the experience. But a traumatic experience or a painful experience sometimes is very difficult to digest, especially for a very young child. It can be almost impossible to fully comprehend and digest something that's very, quite traumatic. And so that can get stored, the understanding, it gets stored in what's called the subtle body, which over time pervades into the physical body and could also cause illness. So Ayurveda does say the cause of emotional imbalances is from undigested experiences.
What about spiritual? Is there spiritual toxins as well?
Those are great. That's great. And yes, there is in this sense, although on the one hand, the spirit is pure, the soul is pure, Atma, Sat Chit Ananda, eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. That's the true nature of the soul. But having said that, we can certainly be toxic in terms of our spiritual beliefs. Or, if someone is extremely dogmatic.
It sounds like all of this relates to lack of movement.
Yep, absolutely. We would say lack of prana, the lack of the flow of prana. That's true.
Interesting. Well, let's bring this to the street. You speak of this age of anxiety. What do you mean by this?
Yeah. So, in the Vedic scriptures, there's a number of Vedic scriptures, but there's the four Vedas. And then there's one called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a scripture that was considered to be the fruit and a sort of a commentary on the four Vedas. And in that scripture that was written about 5,000 years ago, it describes the four ages that this planet goes through. And it goes through what's called a golden age, a silver age, a bronze age, and an iron age.
And then does it recycle? Does it recycle those?
And then it recycles, and it goes back to the golden age again. Yep. There's many, 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 many cycles. We happen to be, according to Vedic astrological understanding, we are in presently what's called the Kali Yuga, which is an iron age. And in each age, there's considered to be four limbs of what's called Dharma, or righteousness, which is truth, purity, compassion, and then the other one is called tapasya, or discipline. And those four legs have to be there for an individual or for a society to function in an optimal way so that people can live peacefully, prosper, and develop spiritually at the same time. In Kali Yuga, 3 out of the 4 legs are very, very damaged, and it's said that we're only living on one leg, and even that one dwindles. So the last leg that we're living on is truth. And we can see now, everyone can see around us how precarious that leg is. If we listen to the media, if we listen to so many things, and to be a politician, it's pretty much accepted there has to be lying quite profusely. So it's a very difficult age in that sense. And so back to the point of anxiety is that in this age, one of the most prominent qualities is anxiety.
What impact does stress and anxiety have on our health?
Yeah, it has a strong impact on our health because what's happening on a subtle level ultimately will ripple through into a physical level. Just like in a positive way, if I want to build a house on the subtle level, I'm imagining it, and then I make a blueprint, and then I get the materials, and I follow the plan, and eventually I build a house. So the subtle precedes what we call subtle precedes growth. So if our mind and our nervous system, which is more subtle than, say, the tissues of the body, if the mind and nervous system are disturbed on a regular basis, then eventually that will disturb the inherent innate intelligence of the body, and it can even cause toxins and pragyaparad, because our mind won't be tuned into ourselves enough to know what actually serves my life and what is opposed to serving my life. So definitely anxiety and stress can interfere with proper awareness, seeing things clearly as they are, and knowing how to act in different situations.
Well, can stress and anxiety also interfere with our ability, because we're in fight or flight, right? So does that interfere with our ability to settle in and imagine, to make the blueprint? So does it interfere with our ability to manifest?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you're not able to slow down enough to be in that creative space.
So you're
sort of that
reactive rather than proactive.
You're in a reactive place, exactly. So that's a very, very prominent quality of Kali Yuga, is that there's always this. I mean, how many people do we know that we could say, wow, that person is almost never in anxiety? It's not very common in this age. But there are things that we can do, and that's where Ayurveda and different practices come in, and healing comes in. But to see it from that lens of how important it is to reconnect on a deep level with our essence or our consciousness or our soul, and then with the, you could say the supreme consciousness or the source of all things as well. Because in that state, all wisdom, all awareness is available to us. It's a little bit like if there's a beautiful calm lake, if we look at the lake, we can see ourselves clearly in the reflection. If the lake is very rough and disturbed, then we look all warbly, and we can't really see ourselves clearly. So when the consciousness is disturbed with anxiety and stress, we just don't see ourselves or life or other people very clearly.
And that's so tragic, because if we don't see ourselves, our life, and other people, we're living in an illusion, aren't we?
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly. That's the word that's often used, living in illusion, because of that.
Well, we're just about out of time for this segment, but could you list quickly, and then we'll address them on the other side of the break, what are the leading causes of anxiety that you see during our times?
Well, I like to start with the physical. I like to start with just what we put in our bodies, because everything is energy. And if we're putting in very low vibration foods, foods that are made in rather than fresh foods that are processed and added with lots of bad oils and fats and sugars and refined substances and chemicals, that's going to bring down our vibration. So foods right there. How we breathe is so important. The water that we drink is so important.
We're going to have to pick up on this list on the other side of the break, and we will do that. Jonathan and I will return to our discussion shortly, so you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and the X Zone TV channel, www.xzonetvchannel.com. Welcome back. This is Mission Evolution. Did you know our entire leading edge, information packed past episode collection is available to listen or download with our compliments? Visit our archives at www.missionevolution.org for our ever growing selection of guests and topics. To find out more about me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the other things I offer, visit www.findyourpathhome.com. Our guest this hour is Jonathan Glass. We're speaking about ancient wisdom to help us through modern times. His website, healingessencecenter.com. Jonathan, we were listing the leading causes of anxiety, and you had mentioned food and the quality and quantity and life force that's in the food that we eat. It appears to me that the quality and quantity of life force that's in the food that we eat at this point, because everything is so processed, is almost negligent. I mean, it's almost non-existent. Does there come a time when it takes more to eliminate the toxins from the food we're eating than the nutrition that we're getting from them?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if sometimes a food will have a negative quotient after we eat it because it takes more energy to detoxify it and eliminate than the nutrients you actually get from that food. So that would be the case of junk food. Ayurveda divides all foods into different categories, and foods that are harmonious and nutritious, foods that are stimulating, and foods that create density and negativity. And the first thing with the negativity is processed, old, toxic foods. And certainly if you go through the aisle at many supermarkets and you pick up a box and you look at the ingredients, all the food coloring and preservatives and the processing that went through, all of those foods will really bring down someone's energy. I mean, I have patients who, they're chocoholics, and they may be eating some very commercial brand of chocolate. So in some cases, the first thing I'll do will say, you know what, from now on, start eating dark chocolate from a high-quality organic brand, and start with that, because just that removes all the crap out of the food, all the toxins out of the food, and it also comes from a much better vibration. And people really notice a difference. Rather than eating something that has a tremendous amount of corn syrup and sugar and preservatives and all kinds of things in there that no human being should ever be eating, at least they're eating something real and somewhat natural.
So as you add all of these things, then you said there's, what's the next level? We were just starting to talk about food, and then we went to
food and air. Breathing is super important. Breathing is, in Ayurveda, it's described that the digestion is like fire, and fire needs oxygen. So we need air to ignite the energy in our cells, and lack of breathing. So you could say lack of exercise, but in Ayurveda, there's so many, or in the yoga system, there's so many different types of breathing practices, but it's called pranayama. It's so important, even just to go out for a walk for 10, 15 minutes a day, really focusing on full, deep breaths is so important. And breathing through the nose primarily, because that actually opens the blood vessels. Even science has now shown that breathing in and out of the nose stimulates the release of nitric oxide, which naturally expands the blood vessels, increases blood flow. So we get more blood to all the cells and the tissues and the nerves and the brain and all the extremities of the body much more efficiently. So breathing is extremely important, extremely important.
So you've got food and you've got breath, and is there another one on the list?
Yeah, well, we got water, of course, and then we have avoiding certain toxins, avoiding the pesticides and the herbicides, which are carcinogenic, and some of the herbicides have an extremely damaging effect on the small intestine, where the root of the body, it's where the body's roots are, that it literally extract and take in the nutrients and send those nutrients through a vein to the liver. But when we eat certain foods with high amounts of specific herbicides and pesticides, it opens the gates of the small intestine and keeps them open for too long of a time, which then means we have proteins and substances in the small intestine that are leaking into the bloodstream. And this can happen. I have people, and I've seen it with patients over the years, almost 24 hours a day, they're leaking toxins into their bloodstream. And this is a cause of chronic illness, chronic disease, chronic inflammation. It's a serious problem. So now, with even more so now, with the pesticides, herbicides, genetically modified foods, and such, and what they've done to wheat, modern wheat. It's important to get educated on these things. There are ways around it, but we don't have to become scholars, but we have to become educated, and that's one of the things that I really tried to emphasize in my book was just to really educate people enough so that they could make really good decisions, the best decisions possible in their lives for their health. And then, of course, there's sense toxins. That means toxins that we're taking in through our mind and our senses where we can't even digest it. So, for instance, if somebody is watching media or listening to media 12 hours a day, and there's certainly people who do that. I know some people who have their media on 24 hours a day. I know people who don't turn off their television at night when they're sleeping because they're listening. I mean, that's an extreme, but many people will have something on, even the news, 12, 15 hours a day. And this is really, really an assault on the senses because we can't digest that. We can't digest it. We can't make sense of it. It's too much coming in all at once. It's like being in a class in high school. You might be able to understand the teacher for the first 45 minutes, but after a while, the brain just goes blank. You can't take in anymore. And that's what's happening to us, especially with the media challenges we have these days. It's very important. And then, overstimulating the senses as well.
When you're listening to media and the brain shuts down, we also have what they still use, I'm sure, subliminal. Is that the way you say it?
Sure.
Messaging.
Yeah.
So the brain shut down, but something's still getting in. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it's a little bit like, in Ayurveda, everything's about digestion. So if you're eating even healthy food, but you eat way too much of it. Say, you can't say this is so delicious, this broccoli something salad, but you go past that point of being satisfied and someone eats way, way too much. Some of that is not going to be digested. Even though it tasted good, it's not going to be digested well. It may be that some of it will turn into ama or toxin, especially if someone chronically overeats. That will happen. So it's still coming into the senses. It's still coming in, but it kind of has to get stored somewhere. So it'll disturb the brain, it'll disturb the nervous system, it'll disturb the intelligence, it'll disturb the mind. And so it will have what in Ayurveda we call a vitiating or a deranging effect on the intelligence, on the mind, on the consciousness.
It's almost like a foreign entity taking up residence. Yep.
Exactly. It's taking up residence. Now, like for the cleanse that I lead, we have a section called the media fast. And it's so amazing because years ago, when we first started doing it, was okay, no television and no flipping through, magazines. That was the big thing. And now it's like 1,000 times more difficult. But we really recommend, really give social media a break. If you have to do it for business, do it for that, but for no other reason. Let's see how long you can do it, but we recommend people do it for 21 days. And it's really powerful when people do that. It is amazing how different people feel when they do only the necessary.
Do you find that people also, what starts to bubble forth is all the things they're cramming down to ignore by staying
That's
totally
true.
involved in media?
That's true.
And that sort of
Absolutely.
How do you deal with
the
that?
beautiful thing is a lot of times it'll come up in the first day or two. They'll be kind of struggling and suffering and dealing with their mind. But then in a couple days after that, there's such a relief, and people start appreciating a tree and walking outside and breathing fresh air and talking to a friend, and that element of the simplicity of life comes back pretty quick. It's really quite amazing. So we don't like those first couple days, but it's a sad thing that that the tendency, due to the captivating, incredibly captivating, mesmerizing, hypnotizing impact of media, can make someone, addicted to it for many, many years, and they can find out, wow, 3 days off of it, I'm like 80% happier than I was. So it's really quite remarkable.
So talk about personal power. How is our personal power involved in you've been talking about regaining balance in all these areas, right? How is our personal power involved in being able to regain balance?
That's a great question. Well, I think the first thing is to recognize that that we are a sovereign being. We do have the right to to think the way we think, and to explore truths in life. And it's in fact, in the Vedic system, it is in one sense the duty and the opportunity of being a human being, that we can know ourselves, and that we can know what is this universe, and we can know our connection with the divine. I mean, that is a given. And if we know that's our birthright to start, and that in one sense that is the purpose of human life. I'm not saying which path that is, but to know yourself and to know your connection with divine, that is our birthright. So to start with that automatically, and if we accept that fully, that's empowering right there. Because if you accept that fully, nobody can tell you, no, you can't do that, no, you can't read that book, no, you can't think that way, no, you can't explore that. Because already you're coming from the place of, I know that I'm here to fulfill my purpose as a human being. And if we start out from that point, that right there is empowering. And then we get to explore what are those things that are interfering with that, and what are those things that can nourish that. And when we make the choices to accept those things in our life that are nourishing for that, and avoid or reject those things that take away from that, that also cultivates personal power. That helps us cultivate personal power. And then I will say there's a certain point where, whether you want to call it God or goddess or the universe or the supreme consciousness or whatever you want to say, there's a reciprocation that comes that empowers us also. There's a certain point where, as we're walking on the path, as we're waking up, there's a reciprocal energy. So it becomes not just me being personally empowered, it's I am being personally empowered by something, in one sense, bigger than me. So it's a loop. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a beautiful Sanskrit scripture, and it says, "As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly." So as we, and I give that which is lacking. I maintain what you have and give what is lacking. So even if we have qualities in us that are lacking,
I would like to explore this further on the other side, but we do need to take a commercial break. Jonathan and I will be back shortly to continue our discussion. Don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and the X Zone TV channel, www.xzonetvchannel.com. Welcome back. This is Mission Evolution, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I love to hear from our audience. Your thoughts are very important to me. To suggest a topic or guest that you think would be of interest, email us info@missionevolution.org. I'm sure we'll all enjoy them. To find out more about me, Gwilda Wiyaka, my school, and the evolutionary tools we offer, visit www.findyourpathhome.com. This hour, we're sharing thoughts with Jonathan Glass. His website, healingessencecenter.com. Jonathan, we were getting into a couple of very interesting things. One of them is you were talking about reciprocal energy and personal empowerment.
Mm.
And we've become islands. And so we don't put out that energy and we don't receive it back. Is the process of purification one of making us more receptive and reciprocal in the divine flow?
Yes, I would say that for sure. It's interesting, there's a Sanskrit word, anartha. Artha means that which is wanted, and when you add the word to it, that means unwanted. So artha means that which is actually wanted in life. What do we really want? What does a human being really need and want? And then what are those things that obstruct that? And those things that obstruct that ultimately are tendencies, habits, belief systems, judgments about life, like we talked about the pragyaparad, ways that we offend our own consciousness, and the ways that we may disrespect other living beings, other living entities. All those things are included in an anartha. So these are tendencies, and we all come in with different tendencies and anarthas that we come in with in this life. So purifying those anarthas, and there's various ways to do that, but purifying those anarthas is very important, because after that, the next stage after that is called anartha nivritti. We become steady as living beings. We become steady in ourselves and steady in our purpose as human beings, as spiritual human beings in this world.
How much of those anarthas are genetic? We're hearing a lot about epigenetics and how some of these tendencies and traits are passed down through generations, through societies and cultures, and that a child, when they're born, are already carrying this in their DNA. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I am talking about that, but we also have to recognize that, or from my understanding, you don't have to do anything, but is that whatever family we take birth in, this is our karma. It has something to do with our karma, our previous actions and previous lifetimes, and our previous proclivities, our tendencies. So it's all it's all weaved in a beautiful, amazing tapestry of sort of, when it comes down to it, no accidents whatsoever. So why is it that, person A comes into this type of family and person B comes into that type of family? And, we may come into a very wealthy, successful family, and it may have all kinds of, shadows there, or not. But everybody comes in a different situation. So yes, you could argue that it's genetic or ancestral on the one hand, but ultimately it's karmic, because the soul takes birth in a family according to our tendencies and actions from that are coming through from a previous lifetime. So in one sense, it doesn't matter.
But this is with the assumption that we do have past lives, yes?
That's the assumption, yes. And that assumption is based on the principle that we are eternal, that we're ever present, that the soul, when the body dies, that the soul exists, continues to exist. And then the principle is, well, what does the soul do after it dies? Where do I go when I die? And there's a lot of different, that's a whole other subject, but it goes somewhere. And again, this is, even assuming that the soul exists, that I am a soul, I am consciousness, and that the physical body dissipates, the five elements, but there's still a me. There's still some kind of consciousness that is me. That goes somewhere. So according to the Vedic system, or from the Eastern perspective, or I would say the Vedic perspective, is that the soul is eternal, and then it can take a while. It may go to some astral realm, and then from that point, at some point, it will take birth again in some other form, according to its previous actions and mindset. It's said that the mind, intelligence, and ego carries along with the soul to its next birth.
So is that a frequency issue? In other words, the things that we haven't cleared compromise our frequency, and when we come back and we come at that frequency with more karma to work out.
Yeah, you could definitely look at it from a frequency perspective, and that's why it's so important to clear the anarthas and raise our frequency. Because when you clear the anarthas, your frequency. Yeah, it's definitely evolutionary, and there's ways to speed up the evolution. And that's through different types of spiritual practices.
And they work on the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. You have to include all four.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
So we go back to that four-legged stool again, right?
Right. Exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Amazing. There's something that we touched on, and I'd like to go back into, because it's such a big thing for people, particularly as we've gone through, the times that we've gone through, and it makes us question everything. Most people feel that they have a purpose. We were talking about purpose. Yes. Feel they have a life's purpose, but most people haven't got a clue what it is. What is life purpose, and how do we find it?
Great question. So that in Sanskrit, that's the word dharma, and dharma means that quality that is inherent in something that's always there. So the dharma of fire is to emit heat and light. And if it's fire, it can't do anything other than that. It has to emit heat and light. The dharma of water is liquidity. Now you could say, well, water can be turned into steam or it could become ice, but that's a derangement of the actual water element. In its actual state, it's liquid. So the understanding is that there's two types of dharma that we as human beings can have. One is the eternal dharma, which is called Sanatana Dharma. And then the other one is called Dharma, or you could call it a Naimittika Dharma, which means our temporary Dharma. And the eternal Dharma, according to the Vedic understanding, is called Sanatana Dharma, or the Dharma of love. So love is the actual nature or essence of the soul. That is our eternal Dharma. If there's a soul, its essence is love. Now, we can be covered by so many anarthas or clouds or misconceptions or so many things, but it still means that still somewhere in there, even the most, horrible person that you could imagine, somewhere in there is love. And in the same way, and then there's the Naimittika Dharma, which means the Dharma, okay, I have this particular form. I have this body, I have this mind, I have these abilities, and then some way I can get in touch with those so I can live according to my nature, according to my temporary birth, but living at the best potential. So I'm not very tall, so it wouldn't be my dharma in this life to play basketball, be a professional basketball player. But so we have to accept our limitations, but we can also, each human being has incredible potential to fulfill their Naimittika Dharma in this life. And the blessing of that, too, is that if you live according to your nature in this life, automatically you can make spiritual advancement. And while you're doing that, you're connecting to your eternal Dharma, which is love. And whatever process or path that is for you, that will enhance the realization of your eternal Dharma, but it will also support and nourish what you're meant to be doing here on the planet.
If we're pursuing that reciprocal energy and clearing what stands between us and participating in it, ultimately, isn't that process our life purpose?
Yes, that is our life purpose. That is the purpose of human life, is to tread that path. In the Vedas, it said, one of the scriptures, it's the first verse is, now that you have attained this human form of life. And it's basically saying, yes, you must tread on the path of self-realization. And just in our culture, I mean, it's there for sure. I mean, gosh, 30 years ago in this culture, it was barely there. But, I mean, it's definitely there, but it's not part of the main fabric of our society. I mean, I don't know of any leaders, maybe a couple touch on it, that actually, I mean, political leaders. There's other leaders for sure, but that are actually speaking, you are a soul, you have a purpose, awakening to your divine nature is your purpose, removing the obstacles is the purpose of being human. We get very confused, in my opinion, of what is the purpose of human life, and that we can get really bogged down in the other goals of life, which is eating, sleeping, they say eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, the four purposes of life.
How about
acquisition? Yeah. So we get stuck, but we have to remember. I say have to, and I say that respectfully, and not like everyone has to. I'm just saying it from my understanding. My belief is that it benefits us to wake up to our divine potential, and if we don't do that, it's very difficult to get in touch with our Dharma. Because if it's just about me, like, what am I supposed to do? But how are we meant to serve? We're all here to serve. And if we come from that spirit of how can I serve? How can I serve raising consciousness in myself and other living beings to awaken to our divine identity? How can I participate in that? And that's where I feel and I believe the reciprocal energy comes in to support that person. Now, things like a really good Vedic astrology chart, or honestly an amazing palmistry reading, because in the palm everything is there. Every single line tells a story. That can confirm someone's Dharma. So that's why somebody might get a Vedic astrology reading or a palmistry reading from somebody who's very, very qualified, who actually understands that there is a purpose for that living entity in this life to fulfill, and by doing that, it's actually called Varnashram Dharma. It means the Dharma that you are meant to perform while you are here in this particular body, in this particular life. And by doing that, the person tends to be more peaceful because they're not disturbed by doing things that are against their nature. And then they can also focus on their spiritual life and wake up to who they really are.
So, Jonathan, we're just about out of time. But in closing, what is your mission?
Well, I would say my mission is to sometimes gradually and sometimes very quickly, help people reconnect to their deepest true nature through identifying, removing obstacles to their health and body, mind, and spirit.
Beautiful, beautiful, Jonathan. Well, it has been such a pleasure having you back on the show, and these are very thought-provoking things that you've brought to us. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Our guest this hour has been Master Acupuncturist and Ayurvedic Practitioner Jonathan Glass. Jonathan is the founder of JivAtma Energy Healing and the author of The Total Life Cleanse. His website, healingessencecenter.com. Remember, our entire information-packed past episode collection is available for listen or download free of charge. Visit our archives at www.missionevolution.org for our ever-growing selection of guests and topics. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka, coming to you on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and the X-Zone TV channel, www.xzonetvchannel.com. Join us next time as this mission continues, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.